In this video, we're going to go ahead and set up our controllers for our pawn. Now keep in mind we are using the Vive for our setup. It comes with two wand controllers. Unreal Engine supports the motion controllers from the Vive as a left and a right based on how you turn them on and set them up. It does support other motion controllers such as the Oculus Touch, but we will be covering the Vive. Due to the universal nature of the way that the motion controllers, the HMD devices, and things like that work in Unreal Engine, you should be able to use the same basic setup and node structure and component structure, and it'll work between devices. So let's go ahead and start with that. Right now we have our default scene root and our camera, which is our pawn. We need to add our motion controllers, and this is pretty simple. We can go to Add Component, Motion Controller, or we can do Add Component, and we can type in something like Motion, and we'll find Motion Controller. Now I'm adding two of these on purpose because I'm going to name one Right Controller, and then I'm going to name the other Left Controller. For our purposes of the demo, once we get into it, we're only going to use one of these to hold our gun, but for our demonstration right now, we're going to set up both. Now inside of our controllers, the only thing that's unique to the motion controller is the motion controller section itself. The index refers to the index of the player we'll be tracking. The hand refers to the hand if you have multiple controllers. And then disable low latency update. Basically, if you're having issues where the item attached to your controller looks like it is running behind or it's not updating properly, you may want to check this so that way it'll go ahead and update everything underneath it in a more timely fashion. Basically, the transform for the controller will be updated before the items, right before the items below it, rather than in a different frame or earlier in the frame, and you might have a more accurate position. For example, we're going to leave it unchecked. So on our left controller, player index 0, hand left. On our right controller, player index 0, hand right. Now if we were to go ahead and hit play, if I moved around my controllers or my head, I'm not going to be able to see anything. The controllers are tracking, we just can't see anything because nothing's actually assigned to our controller. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is pretty simple. We're just going to attach a mesh. On our left controller, we're going to add a cube. And we'll go ahead and create a cube, drag it onto our left controller, and now it's a parent and a child. On our right controller, we'll add a component sphere, drag it onto our right controller, and now you'll see we have our left controller with a cube and our right controller with a sphere. Let's go ahead and make sure our checkbox here on the right under scale is checked. Checkbox. Lock is locked. So we can change our scale all at the same time to 0.2. We'll do the same with the sphere. And that way we get just something that's a lot smaller and easier to see. I'm thinking these might still be too big. So let's go with 0.1. And let's go with 0.1 on our cube as well. That might give us a little bit easier. Now here's something I'd like to do. If you notice, we have this really annoying circle here. That's part of our default scene root. If you go ahead and add a component scene, and you'll notice me start, well, that was scene component. Let's try that again. You'll notice me start doing this anytime I create a blueprint. We'll do a scene component down here. We'll name this root, and then we'll drag this and replace the original. It's not going to really do anything. It's just going to get rid of our visual cue there and give us a more cleaner interface. Now let's go ahead and run this, and we'll notice there's an issue. Two things. Pay attention. About 1 second after we hit play and our VR preview comes up, our character gets shifted, as you can see right there. The reason for that is collision. Remember how before I mentioned we didn't want to use our character because we were colliding with the ground and it would cause issues? Well, in this case, our cube and our sphere are colliding with each other and causing problems. So not only are they not spawning because of that, they're also causing our character to move itself. And you never want to move your player without their permission. You always want the player to choose how they move and look. It'll cause motion sickness if you force a movement. This is pretty easy to fix. We're going to go to our cube and our sphere, we'll go down to collision in our detail panel, and we'll change our preset to no collision. We'll do the same with our sphere, no collision, and we'll go ahead and run this. And you'll notice we now have, if we were to move around our controllers, which are currently off because I took too long, but you'll notice as I turn them on, we have our meshes appearing. If I move my headset, I can look around. If I move my controller and I rotate it and tilt it, you'll notice, well, we have our controller. And it is tracking in real time everything that we want. You notice it's even casting shadows. So here's a small issue you may run into depending on how you've set it up. And let me cover the problem. Our root is what gets oriented when we are using our head-mounted device. The root is where the origin is and our rotation. The camera is affected by the root as well as our controllers. If you were to further rotate, if we move our controllers underneath our camera, for example, and we were to run this, you'll notice we've lost our controllers. Now technically, if we look around and we look down, we can see the shadows, and our controllers are here somewhere. They're really hard to find half the time. You don't want to do that. Basically, you're inheriting the rotation more than once. Make sure your controllers, we can go ahead and drag them off the camera and attach them back to the root. Make sure your controllers and your camera are attached to your root so that way when they play, you can properly see your controllers. And honestly, that's it. If you were to strap on your headset, hit play, and go wander around your chaperone area, you have full 360-degree view. You have your controllers that you can move, you can rotate them, you can juggle them, and the meshes are fully articulated and move properly based on the controller movements. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to make a simple gun mesh. We're going to use the geometry editing tools to create it, and hopefully this time it doesn't come out as bad as my last one. We're going to go ahead and replace our meshes inside of our pawn with that gun, and we're going to test it a little bit so you can get a feel.